Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more MBTI. Today we are going to be trying to get a little bit better view of what goes on inside the mind of Ian Crossland. He is from Timcast IRL. That's where I know him from. He has many other credits to his name, but I am often intrigued in what is Ian thinking, and so we're going to try and get a view inside of his mind. But before we begin, I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not trying to claim some intimate knowledge of Ian. I am merely using the tools that I have developed to help people help themselves to get a little bit better determination of where he might be coming from. The tool that I use is this type grid. If you look, you have two columns on the left, two columns on the right. That is things, or an S, or ideas, or an N. Uh, what you do with that is you either get new ones or you sort through old ones. And that would be the columns individually, right? S, you can look and see we have new and old wrote on the bottom. That's going to give you either a P or a J. You can look on the left-hand side of the column, and uh, it says self or tribe. That's what you do that for. So are you gathering new ideas for the tribe, or are you gathering old things for yourself? That's the determining factor there. And then you got rigid or flexible. Do you try to control the situation, or do you flex around other people's ideas? Are you very rigid in how you go about your daily life, or are you very flexible in things? And direct or informative is going to tell us how you relay the information back. Do you get to the point, or do you chase rabbit holes? With that being said, we are now going to dive into this. I try to find an interview for these things with someone who is not well known. This guy's got like 2,500 subs. We're actually about what and what, right? And so I'm trying to expose new people to my crew at the same time as we are doing the MBTI to help people to determine what's going on in their own minds. Let's dig into this. We're going to start at the beginning. And normally I go a little bit farther in to let people get comfortable. But this is an intriguing conversation, and it may wind up getting stopped a couple of times along the way. I'm going to try not to a great degree. But let's dig in and see what's up.
Of what we should be doing as people on this cultural rock that doesn't seem to know where to go. I believe that the one of the biggest issues with right wing or conservative cultural stuff is religion. That it is baked in religion. That it is so closely tied to the dogma of religion. And so, for somebody like myself who grew up Catholic, confirmed in the Methodist Church, but then eventually became an atheist. It almost feels like you guys, not you specifically, but you guys, the conservative crowd, are saying I don't really belong. Because
No. What we're saying is that if you don't have a basis for a belief system, that can be atheistic, but that is extremely hard to do. Then you will fall into the current craziness, right? That's not exclusionary. You can be atheist and be a conservative, but it's highly unlikely that those two things coincide. Uh, I personally am a deist more than anything. I believe in God, but not necessarily any of the doctrines that are of earth. And so, if you are interested in that type of thing, I've got a whole playlist. It's called an unconventional Bible study. Talks all about that. It is a very different way to look at the current Bible and interpretation. So feel free to welcome to check that out.
because I don't believe in God. And instead, I would think that it would be better for all of us to really instead of worry about how did we come to the values that we agree on, just worry about the fact that we do indeed agree on the values. We care about community, we care about family, we care about merit and capitalism and things like that. And when I called in, Tim was very quick to kind of shut it down and say, "Well, you need a mission, and the right has God, and the left has wokeness." But
I don't believe it's nearly that simplistic. I agree with Indian Jesus here that it should be a little bit more about how you stand and not necessarily about where you stand.
you seemed a little bit more open to
Right? Are you standing in morals that I agree with? Because you can be standing in morals that I don't agree with. That is a thing.
it. So just let me throw it to you, and what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is the behavior. Like who are you and what are you and how do you behave? That's my main thing.
All right, so the most important thing is behavior. Can you put your hands on behavior? No, you can't. Behavior is an idea, so that's going to lead me into the end sphere straight off the top.
It's like if there is, I can't definitively say God is real. I don't know. I've been essentially agnostic my entire life, and it seems real when I look at the cosmic microwave
That's fairly flexible, right? It's not saying God is not real, and it's not saying God is real. That is trying to flex around his beliefs.
background radiation, which is basically a scientific breakthrough with these radio telescopes. They look at this like it looks like a web of radiation left over after the Big Bang, and it's like
That's kind of getting lost in the possibilities of things.
it resembles like a neural net with like radiation arcing through planetoids and then like through these star systems, and like it looks kind of like energy going through neurons, like the neurons are the stars and things. And I'm really into fractals and like the philosophy of as above so below, and the deeper you look,
Absolutely.
the more like atoms look like stars, and like so I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's real. And when I meditate, I'll communicate, and I'll have responses, and it could just be my subconscious, but it could be more, and I'm open to it. And
Okay, so we got a whole lot of nothing, right? We got a lot of ideas, a lot of brand new ideas, no best ideas, right? No, this is the way to go. A whole lot of there's a bunch of possibilities, right? That is leaning me towards NE, extroverted intuition.
it sometimes it does feel like I'm like using people, using the system when I say God is real or I believe in God, because like I can't prove it. And my whole life I've been like, if I can't prove it with scientific means of some sort, if I can't see it, sense it, then why would I say it's real? But maybe then I could argue these days that maybe I do believe I'm sensing it. Um,
And
That's extremely flexible, right? He is reading both sides of the argument. He is saying this and trying to hash it out with himself. That is flexibility, right? Rigid people don't do that. Rigid people say this is the way and you go with it. Tim is T, right? Ian is more of an F. So I'm definitely leaning NE and F for Ian. We're going to look for motivations as a tribe or self, right? We're going to look for direct and informative. He has so far not chased any rabbit holes. He's got a lot of information. He's presenting a lot of different options, but he is not chasing any of them off into the distance, right? So that is not being informative. And he's not being circular with it either, right? He's not repeating the same thing. He's making different arguments slightly, but it is not the circular that we would see in an informative. So that's given me more of a direct, which is kind of surprising. I was really expecting him to be more direct or more informative.
well, that's really I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Is that using the language? That's something that I focus on a lot. Is that if everybody is talking about God and calling their whatever belief it is God, then how can we scientifically get closer to that God if it is real? If it's not real, then then we don't need to worry about it. And again, we can go back to okay,
Okay, so now this is a contrast, right? Ian is an NE. This guy is an NI. He is trying to force everything into the boxes. He's not sure about the boxes. He's really young. And young people really don't have anything figured out. I'm not trying to hit on anybody, right? But he's more of the opposite side of the intuition scale than Ian is. Ian is very much open to all these idea possibilities. Where this guy, like, I don't want to call him Indian and I don't want to call him Jesus, so I don't know. I'm going to call him this guy, but this guy is very much trying to force everything into the atheism box. And you're free to do that.
these are the values that will lead to
But it seems more of an NIT feel, whereas Ian is an NEF.
a good community, good society, and all that. And so let's just focus on those. And if there is something out there that's bigger, that I completely agree with you. A lot of people when they hear atheist, they think, oh, you must think that there's nothing and no, you don't believe in anything. It's like, no, I believe in love. I believe that there must be something bigger than just our meat sacks walking around. I believe that there's some type of consciousness, but we can't study that when everybody's saying, well, yeah, it's God.
Yeah, skepticism is key. You've got to try and poke holes in your own theory. It's that's why I like be like, okay, it's there. Now everyone else follow me. It's like, nah, that's not good enough, man. I need more proof. I need.
I need more proof. I'm picking up a lot of that. Like, we're going to look for more confirmation before I say self. And remember, self is not selfish, right? Especially to you, if you are a self user, you're like, what? But it's about the results for me, right? I'm a self person. I'm giving all of this to y'all freely. But I am a self person. I used this for me first. It has to make sense to me first. It has to fit the boxes for me first. That's a self, right? As opposed to someone who is, hey, all of you, look at this thing. And then when y'all figure it out, I'll take my part out of it. That is a tribe. If you're saying a lot of we, if you're saying a lot of us, if you're saying a lot of team oriented things, then you're probably tribe. If you're saying a lot of I, a lot of me, or a lot of self oriented things, then it's probably self. And again, that is not selfish, that is self focused. That's a different thing.
Hard proof. But also, I've been thinking lately that the scientific method isn't the only kind of science. Just because they call it the scientific method doesn't mean like that's what science is. It's just one way to view
That is so NI adverse that it is hilarious.
science, which is like have an idea and then try and break the idea. And if you can't replicate it, then it's not real. That's the scientific method. But
Right.
sometimes it's like things just happen. Like they call them miracles in the Bible, but like because patterns are so great, if it happens 1 out of every 80 times, it doesn't mean that it's not real.
Yeah.
The scientific method will tell you that it's not calculably, scientifically.
Absolutely.
No. What the scientific method tells you is that you're conducting the test wrong and trying to collect the wrong data. That when you're wrong in the scientific method, it means that you need to adjust your target. You are trying to prove the wrong thing if you're not getting the evidence. And if you're getting the wrong evidence, you're trying to prove the wrong thing. You need to refocus. Not to change the evidence to fit what you want, but to find out what it is the evidence is truly bringing you to. That is a whole different thing than what he just said.
Scientific method will tell you that it's not calculably, scientifically.
Absolutely.
It's just saying that you have the wrong parameters, that you still have stuff to discover.
Absolutely. So how do you think that we can maybe shift the paradigm of getting closer to quote unquote God through that, whether it's the scientific method or if it's just acknowledging a bunch of anomalies in energy or whatever it is. Again, we have to talk about it in this way because we don't necessarily understand what.
He's saying a lot of we. Ian's saying a lot of I, right? You see the difference? If not, rewind it and go back. But he says a lot of we. We have to understand. We have to discover. Ian's like, I need to understand. I want to know.
We're talking about. We all kind of feel like there's something there, but it seems like there's only, some people are willing to say, I know that it's this. And then there's other people who are willing to say, I don't know what it is. I think it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. I think it's, the most wonderful thing if we could understand it, but we don't, and that's okay.
One thing I like is something called ephaptic coupling, and maybe we could pull up the definition of that at some point. Maybe put it up in the StreamYard. It's ephaptic coupling is when neurons in the brain communicate not through chemical reactions, which when people think of neurons communicating, it's like one lights up and then sparks the one next to it. That's the normal neural pathway. This is when neurons communicate through magnetic fields, local magnetic fields. So like one neuron in your brain will connect and activate another neuron far away, non-chemically, and then hypothetically one neuron in my brain could activate a neuron in your brain.
I can tell you about that too. I've got a whole playlist, Infinite Integrations, if you want to check that out. I'm still like, we haven't picked up a whole lot of self or tribe here, and that's the part that I'm really only stuck on. He hasn't been chasing rabbit holes. He's telling you about something right here, and it's going to be pretty extensive, but he's not going to run in a circle. Watch.
Through and like what magnetic field? Is it the Earth's magnetic field? Is it the sun's magnetic field that we're communicating through? Is it the galactic magnetic field? And that maybe there are activations that can cause your neurons to manipulate without, like, that aren't human. Like there might be other ways to activate, and maybe like like what is God even? Is it just a bunch of fields
Exactly.
co-mingling? And but this stuff is like really, really fascinating, that we can communicate across long distances through magnetic fields. That might be a step towards understanding what God is.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And no, I hadn't heard of that. And looking at the chart here, it looks, rather complex and definitely like something that, I could sink my teeth into. And it just feels like there's too many people. I'll use the Timcast Discord server just because that's probably the largest sample size that I have for this, of people who I share values as to what should we be doing.
I'm going to give a shout out right here. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, they have a free Discord. You're going to have to pass a little quiz to get in there, but it's not that hard if you watch a couple of episodes. There is another community of like-minded individuals doing somewhat of the same thing.
What should we be?
They have many, many, many discussions on a very deep level for a lot of these topics, and you should definitely check out the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. It is linked on my page.
How should we be moving forward? How should we be engaging with the politics, the discussion, all of that stuff? What should we be doing? I find that most people that I agree there, but again, there's no interest in stuff like what you're talking about, and it's all the people who are like, oh, Ian rolling a one again. Oh, Ian, derailing the conversation.
That is a very frequent occurrence. I'm pretty sure it's intentional, but like that is frequently, like that's why I'm doing this, because sometimes Ian just does things that doesn't make sense, and I want to understand him, so that's why I'm doing this, right?
Which
I'm not trying to dig on him. I think y'all please understand I'm never being mean when I talk about any of this. It's like
really frustrates me because you
like often he brings very insightful things to the conversation, often, but then sometimes it's like we're talking about this situation, it's like graphene. It's like, but that has nothing to do with graphene. Like that just came randomly out of the blue. But it's the NE, right? He's NE dominant. He's always looking for the new idea.
clearly are not you and Tim are clearly two very different people, but that's an amazing thing. And I think what you
I'm doing a type on Tim too. That's coming.
bring to the show is so unique in and of itself that it bothers me so much when people don't get it. It bothers me so much when people don't get it.
It's an Einstein, I think it's an Einstein quote. He's like, if you judge a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, everyone's going to think the fish is an idiot because that's not what it's built for. And it's kind of like me on a politics show. I enjoy politics. I like thinking about them and talking about them, but I don't study them every day. I'd rather think about science and communication and things like relationships and stuff like that. Those are my real passion.
All right, so we got 3 general ideas, not specific things, right? I would rather do this instead of being concerned with the tribe. That is what that comes down to. If you're politics avoidant, you are almost certainly going to be self. Like the people who are heavily invested in politics, like heavily invested, blue hair, scream at the sky type of people, are almost always going to be an E.
About them and talking about them, but I don't study them every day. I'd rather think about science and communication and things like relationships and stuff like that. Those are my real passions.
Yeah.
So, but it's humbling and humiliating to be in a position where I'm not an expert or comfortable, but it's also like an opportunity to kind of bridge a gap between people that are really into like earthly politics.
Like he brings some good
people
stuff
that are
in
more into
sometimes,
stuff
and then
I'm into,
sometimes it's just like
hard science,
way out of
or,
left
like,
field.
pseudoscience and like just learning new things that you don't quite have the definitions for.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm defining a lot of those things on that playlist. We're going to go ahead and do a type, talk about it, and then we're going to come back for some confirmations, right? Because I feel like we've got enough information now to make a fairly good determination. Not a perfect one, because I'm not sitting down talking with him. We're not having an in-depth conversation. We're 20 minutes into this video, but we're 8 minutes into the interview. It's not like this is an extensive thing. I'm showing how fast that this can be done, because it could have been done faster if he'd have been talking more about tribe or self. I'm definitely giving him ideas, so that's going to throw us onto the right half of the bar, straight off the top. He is all about the new ones. That's going to make him a P, straight off the top. He is self. That's given an I all the way. And then from there, we get into rigid and flexible, right? So is he flexible or is he rigid? Well, he's flexible. So we're looking at an INFP. That's going to be on the right upper quadrant right there. And now is he direct or informative? Well, it turns out Ian's actually pretty direct, right? He is not chasing rabbit holes. He is not talking in circles. He is not interrupting. He is not jumping the gun to talk. He's very direct in his presentation. What that means is, for the third slot here, he is going to be a normal, everyday INFP. FINESITE. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that up over here. That is INFP. So that's going to be that one. And we're going to take this one down. And we're going to talk about it, right? The difference between the normal and the alternate is whether or not you are direct or informative. If you are direct, that means that your third slot, which is the third one down, is going to be introverted. You're holding most of the energy of communication back for yourself. Whereas if you are informative, it would be TE, because you are giving the information back in abundance. So what is an INFP and what are they going to be concentrated on? The FI is what he is going to do without thinking about it, right? And what is FI? It is my morals. It is how I feel about things, right? Or ideas, right? In this particular case, it is about ideas. How do I feel about all of these ideas? The part that he feels responsible for is making sure that everybody knows about the ideas. Well, we got that in abundance, right? He's very good at that. He's going to get very defensive about his organization. So that means that his sourcing is going to be his biggest problem, and he's going to get defensive about it. He gave good example about that. If we can't scientifically define God, how can we say that God is real? That is that type of a thing. He's getting defensive about the organization. It's not the best example, but it is an example. Other people's rationale and thoughts is the part that's really just going to fall by the wayside, right? It's not that he's intentionally ignoring them. He does see them. It's just that they don't hold as much weight. They're not as important to him. The ones in the middle really don't get a whole lot of information, right? It goes, you get about 90%, 70%, about 40%, like 20%. And then it's 20, 40, 90, and 100, or 70 and 100. Like it's the top and the bottom match, and then it comes in to very little frequency reception in the middle of the wave here. And so the TE and the FE, he's not really going to get a whole lot of information there. He's going to fall back with what other people think and other people feel. And that absolutely explains why he comes out of left field, right? That absolutely explains why he'll suddenly just derail the conversation, because he's not really paying that much attention to it. He's thinking about his thoughts about the conversation that was going on here, or some tangential way that it ties in, and he jumps in, and it's just like, with no consideration for the thoughts that are going on now from other people, TE, or the feelings around FE. That absolutely explains what I came here looking for. That's not to put any particular, disorder or anything of that nature. The heart, right, the FE, is what he really wants to do, though. He really wants to know what everyone feels and to feed into that. He wants to do that using the solar plexus, because that's where the food comes from. He wants to feed his soul by having the best possibility. That's why he's looking at all of them. He just really is not good at sorting them, right? He's really good at seeing them, just not determining which is which. That's part of life. Not everybody is good at everything. The things that are really going to trip him up, though, that's the sacral and the base, right? This is the things that you get really wrong when you get them wrong. And for him, that is going to be all the things as opposed to the best thing. He's going to think he already knows the best thing. We have an example, graphene. If you've ever seen Ian talk about graphene, it is a sight to behold. That is his best thing. Everything gets tied into that. He gets defensive about it. SI is best thing. That's where the third eye is for him. This is the flip side of that. This is not seeing the other possibilities because you already have the best thing. That's why this is such a detriment to these people, right? Because they already believe that they have seen all the possibilities and determined the best thing. They don't see any more things. All the other possibilities for the uses of the source material for graphene is flown out the window. I personally like some of the graphene stuff. I don't like some of the graphene stuff. It's a mixed bag for me. But for Ian, he is all in on it. This explains that. The part that is really going to mess him up, though, is personal thoughts and logic. He's really good at seeing all the possibilities and knowing how he feels about those possibilities. It leads him to think that he's got the best thing. But maybe the logic isn't behind it. Maybe there is some nefarious thing that is associated with it and you haven't done your yes-no checks. The very best, most important thing to do is your yes-no checks for a TI base or a TI sacral, but TI base especially. You want to be asking yes-no about literally everything until you get good and settled. Most things, not all things, but most things can be settled with a yes-no question. And so you need to work on building the yes-nos. If you are more interested in this and want a greater explanation of how to help yourself with this, I will link the INFP and alternate video here, and I get into much greater depth about this particular type in that video. Now we're going to go back and we're going to look at Ian and we're going to try and run some confirmations for INFP. Let's see what we got from here on it.
And I didn't even expect, that obviously everybody knows that you're, into graphene and stuff like that. But the depth that specifically, the James Tour presentation went in, I was like, oh wow, like it's not just that he read about this and like he knows about that stuff, and
that's because he got hammered. So on the Timcast podcast, every time he brings it up, people are hitting him, right? And so he has gotten the answers for the things that he didn't when he began. We'll try and see if there's something besides graphene that is the thing, because there can be multiple the things, just like there can be multiple the boxes. And so we will see if he has another the thing that maybe he can't logically support in that manner, or if he gives an example of logic not really falling into yes, no, A, B questions.
That when seeing you in a different light like that is and as the unwanted poet saying, I'm a fanboy a little bit, but it bears saying that the people, for anybody out there who's saying, oh, Ian needs to be off the show, like
I'm getting like, I want to look real quick. I'm getting very much that this let's not. I was going to try and type in too, but we're not.
You don't understand that there is an entire swath of people who are not like us in watching Timcast videos every day and what's happening in the culture war.
Right.
And
he is more rigid,
and that's a good thing. If everybody was like us, we'd probably all be annoying.
He's a little more informative.
Out there just living life, getting involved in acting, in music, in science, and all that kind of stuff. And so I just wanted to say that is one thing that people definitely do not give you enough credit for.
And that's more lists, right?
Me being on IRL with Tim is kind of like a microcosm of the culture war, because Absolutely. He and I come at the same thing from different angles, and then you'll see, like, are we going to fight and I'm going to be like, fuck you, and walk away, or are we going to overcome our emotions and allow each other to, like, or allow ourselves to disagree?
Who cares what other people think or feel?
Topic, which is basically what we've been able to do for 3.5 years or however long we've been doing it.
Yeah, and
however long it's been.
So I want to dive back into what you were talking about, how the scientific method may not be the only way to address to address this, because you said something similar with Dr. James Tour about science.
Okay, so this is going to break into some of the logic being flawed, right? Because like we showed, like I believe earlier, and what I said earlier, like I'm not trying to say that I am absolutely correct, but the scientific method is an investigatory process. If you are not getting the correct results, it's because you are asking the wrong questions, not because the process is broken, but because the parameters have not been correctly defined.
It's being the wrong framing when we're talking about religion. So you brought up the
But for religion, it is absolutely the wrong framing. Like, provable, testable, observable results is not ever going to be metaphysical, right? Until we develop our telekinetic and telepathic powers in a manner in which it is demonstrable, that's something that we're just not going to be doing. But minor movements of the electromagnetic forces through sheer force of determination of will is absolutely a thing, and I have instructions on that.
the phatic coupling thing. If you could bring it down to, dumb it down a little bit, what would be a different way to approach, getting closer to God in a different context than the scientific method as we understand it?
Well, it's
All right.
it's personal. Your relationship with God.
This is going to be hard for him to narrow down because he is so broad open, right? He is not best idea. He is the spectrum of ideas, all the ideas.
God is personal only because like the way I experience it might not be the way others do. But what I started doing was meditating. I started in 2006 making YouTube videos because I was like, well, Jesus is pretty cool, and maybe what would he do if he was here right now? He'd probably make internet videos and tell people. So I was like, let's do that. Let's try and like spread the goodness. So I'll do that. And then I started reading this book called The Four Agreements. It's this book of Toltec wisdom by these ancient Aztec, Toltecs. They predated the Aztecs, and they were like the wise men of the culture. And they were like, they boiled things down to these 4 agreements that if you live by, it greatly enhances your life and the life of others around you. It's like, always do your best, only do it and say what you mean, don't take anything personally, and don't make assumptions. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's not only tell people about it, but let's start to live like that. So I started doing, like, basically, I started being honest. And I had to learn the hard way that honesty doesn't mean you say everything you're thinking. There's a time and a place to say.
That is the TEFE, not getting the reception, right? It's not that you don't know what people think or what they think, but that you're not really comprehending it in the right manner.
You're thinking. Sometimes you can say nothing and you're still being honest. It's like discretion. So honesty and discretion are very important. But at the time, I didn't have that. I was just an open fire hose of truth, of honest, of everything I thought.
And so what are we looking at, right? FINE. Look at all these possibilities. I believe is correct. SITE. Here, you take my thing, and I don't really care what you think about it. All right, back to him.
My justification was, well, it's true, so I have to say it. And I was alienating people, and people were like, dude, shut the fuck. People didn't want to confide in me anymore. But at the same time, I told all the things that come into my mind. Something would come into my mind from my past. I'd make an internet video about it and humiliate myself and tell people, and then it would no longer bother me. And so I started to gain clarity of thought. Like, I would no longer have these thoughts that would pop into my head because I had already told everybody about them. They were gone. They were out there now. They weren't in here. And then I started to be able to control my thoughts and think long strains of sentences, communicate like, you're doing very well. I would think it and then say it. And then I realized I could think it to myself and it would respond. And then I was like, oh, and then after the years, I was like, maybe that's communicating with like the Schumann resonance of consciousness or the greater galactic scope. And maybe that's what God is. And that's kind of how I started to experience it, was the response that I would get in my own head. It was, for a long time, I just called it my subconscious. But now I'm like, well, maybe there's more than just me involved in this. I mean, obviously, these
Maybe it's not just me.
fields that we're within are greater than Ian's body.
But let's dig into that. So even if it is just your subconscious, and let's say that you have a subconscious and other people have a subconscious, and then we go back to the aphatic coupling, and that subconsciousness could be connected in some way that we don't completely understand. Where is so obviously I understand your answer to the original question being that just exploring different different individual experiences and learning about those experiences. But to take it a step further, then I still don't see where the dogmatic belief of this is a God has to come from. And I just believe that using the word God it always muddies the water because nobody knows what God is. You know.
I spend an awful lot of time on this. Like an awful lot of time on this. I'm a deist, right? I believe in God. I believe that God is all things, everything at once. And so I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, there's an argument.
You know what I mean? It's like how are we better going to define this thing by using words that we already don't know how to define?
Yeah, that I think comes from the ancient texts where they're like, well, we've come as far as we can with our technology. Let's just call it something and just kind of rely on that. But also, I think it was used as a control mechanism, like literally.
All of the dogmas are a control mechanism, every single one of them. I don't care which one you believe. All of the dogmas are. God himself is not. There's a distinction to be made.
Some guy would roll into town, kill everybody in the village except for like the women, the children, or some of the subservient men, kill them all, burn all their texts, all their history, and then say, I'm God now. Worship me. Everything comes from me. Nothing was before this. And then you teach the kids that. They don't know any better. And then they're like, okay. And then they write it down. Before God, there was nothing. Then God gave us light. Like he came in with electricity from ancient Atlantis tech. And then that happened over and over. And then some
That's not a rabbit hole.
new warlord would come in, kill that guy and all his followers and be like, I'm God now. And then you have different gods and different texts. And like, it's so easy to just call yourself God if people don't have any reference. And I think that for sure that word has been severely abused over time. There's so much more going on than three letters can explain. We've got to figure it out. That's why
God is just the terminology, and the terminology really, in the end, doesn't matter. I feel fairly confident with the INFP. I don't want to just ride off of this guy's interview. Like, we do this with a purpose. We are bringing knowledge to both the interviewer and the interviewee. I feel like INFP is a good fit for Ian. If you would like an official typology of the Indian Jesus, let me know down below. I have a fairly good idea. These things that I teach, right, that's what I am doing here, is I am teaching you how to use the tools that you can use to help yourself. I have a whole system that I devised that I used for myself first because I am self-oriented. And then I said, you know what, this worked for me. Let me give it to other people. And everyone that I know of that has actually worked the system has had their life improved by it. They have come to a greater understanding of their own minds. And the reason that I am doing these videos in the manner that I am doing them is so that we have examples of self, of direct, of things, of ideas, so that we have ideas that you can use and say, well, I definitely identify with that. Maybe I'm things. Because you lie to yourself, you think your ideas, but you're things. You think yourself, but you're tribe. You do the exact opposite a lot of the time. It's really hard to type yourself. It takes a great level of self-honesty. And so one of the best ways to figure out self-honesty is through mirroring, right? What we are doing here is using Ian as a mirror for these traits so that you can identify with mirror things that you see within yourself. And then you can start to assimilate them into yourself. Everyone uses every function. The difference is how you use the function and to what degree you use the function. We have Ian using his functions to figure out what all the possibilities are. He is the hypothesizer in the scientific process. He's not the experimenter. He's not the recorder. He's the hypothesizer. He is the one who is trying to see all the possibilities that are out there. And then somebody else like me comes along and says, hey, I see all of these things you're pointing out, but I think that the best thing, the best idea is going to be this one. And then someone else comes along and says, all right, well, if that's the best idea, then in order to implement it, we're going to need to do all of these things. And then somebody else comes along and says, all right, you did all of these things. Let's see what the best result was, right? That's how it works. I use the scientific method to describe how MBTI works because it's literally the same thing. It's evolutionary process. You have somebody who is looking for all the danger, and you have someone who knows what to do in the danger. You have someone that looks for the emergencies, and you have someone who knows what to do in the emergencies. You have healers and you have hunters. You have different functions for different people. It's an evolutionary tract. I'm trying to identify so that we can assimilate and use these things because they're superpowers. Ian has the ability, without thinking about it, to know where his morals are, right? So much so that he doesn't waver. And then he feels responsible using his morals to make sure that everybody sees all the possibilities, even if it goes against the current way of thinking, even if it pushes against the TE and the FE right together. If it pushes against them and says, even though you don't like my thoughts, here they are. Even though you don't like my feelings, here they are. It is my responsibility to give them to you. And he does that. That's why he interrupts. That's why he jumps in with the off-the-wall conversation. It's because it's his responsibility to do that. It's not his responsibility to find the best one. It's to make sure you know that this option is out there. Y'all make sure y'all get back over and watch the whole interview. I'm going to leave the link down below because I always do that. Y'all make sure y'all get back over there. Give a like, share, and a sub. Throw a comment. If you like what I'm doing, do the same thing. Hit all the bells and whistles. Let me know that you appreciate this. I'm trying to help you identify things to help you. I can't change you. I have no right to even try. And to the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Tape. Peace.